Hi, I'm Virginia Thompson, Vice President of Product Management at Integration Point, and this is your straight-to-the-point update for July 9th, 2018. We've seen no slowdown in global trade activity this past week that importers need to stay on top of. Most impactful in the United States has been the July 6th effective date of the first set of Section 301 25% tariffs on Chinese goods. But other actions in the United States, along with activities by the EU, Mexico, China, and other regions of the world, have been keeping the world's global traders very busy as well. The week's highlights began on July 5th when Mexico imposed its second round of retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. goods. Mexico had already imposed one round of retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. goods after the U.S. had imposed the 25% and 10% duties on steel and aluminum goods. But this past week, Mexico imposed 25% duties on several fresh cheese and whey products and 20% duties on fresh and frozen pork and ham cuts, effective again on July 5th. Then, as noted above, the U.S. on July 6th imposed the Section 301 goods on China goods that covered a wide range of products, particularly in Chapters 84, 85, 87, 88, and 90, which were the chapters that the USTR felt were most appropriate after their extensive investigation. Effective almost immediately, China imposed immediate retaliatory duties. This did not come as any great surprise, since China had announced ahead of time that they would be imposing these 25% additional duties on 545 products. Those products covered a range of products primarily in the animal and agriculture chapters. So if your company is importing goods into China in agricultural or animal products, it would be a good idea to check that list to see whether or not these products affect you. Finally, the EU took an interesting action this past week in voting to put in place provisional measures to put in place a 25% duty and quota controls on steel and aluminum products to protect the EU from being flooded by goods that might have otherwise shipped to the U.S. These are not 25% duties or quota controls on products coming from the U.S. per se. What they are goods that would be coming from other countries. So the idea here is that they are concerned that exporters that would have shipped steel and aluminum products to the United States and now will no longer find a market there because of the 25% duty into the United States would be looking to the EU as a market instead, and they're concerned that their market will be flooded. So they're putting, as a sort of preventative measure, these 25% duties and quota controls in the EU. Per EU regulations, these provisional measures will be in place for up to 200 days. So again, if you are a company that imports steel and aluminum into the EU, it would be a good idea to take a look at this list of tariff numbers and see whether or not this impacts your company. A little more detail on managing the Section 301 updates. As noted before, this went into effect this past weekend on July 6th and covered a wide range of subheadings, 818 subheadings, which comes out to over 1,600 fully qualified numbers in those chapters noted before. The original goal of USTR had been to make this 301 impact represent $50 billion in import value annually. But after the many thousands of comments that were submitted and their research and analysis of those comments, they changed the list and they took some of the tariff numbers off the initial list and cut it back to a smaller number to represent only $34 billion. So at this point, the list of those 1,600 fully qualified numbers represents $34 billion in import value annually. So if you are actually filing an import entry on one of those 1,600 fully qualified numbers, you now need to file this Chapter 99 number, 9903-8801 on the first line, but you also need to file the original or the normal HDS number on the second line right along with it when you're filing entry on the product, so that you're paying not only the 25% duty, but also whatever is the normal duty along with it, and declaring both tariff numbers at the same time. A couple of other things to know about these Section 301 goods. If you're admitting them into a foreign trade zone, unless you are able to admit them in a domestic status, they must be admitted in a privileged foreign status, so that later when they are withdrawn from their FTZ, you are paying that 25% duty, regardless of whether or not this duty is in place at that time. On the good side, these goods are eligible for drawback. And then finally, USTR announced this past week in a press release that an exclusion process will be announced, or more details on it will be announced in the coming week. There will be a Federal Register notice that will be issued probably in the coming week with all the details about that, but companies will be able to apply for an exclusion process, much like they were able to or have been able to under the Section 232 duties as well. So there'll be more details about how that process will work forthcoming. A few other things to keep an eye out for. As noted before, USTR's original goal was to make the original value for the Section 301 represent $50 billion, but after those comments were submitted and some of the tariff numbers were removed, they ended up with only $34 billion left, and so they created a second list that represents $16 billion in annual import value. Those $16 billion represent 284 more subheadings, and they are now soliciting comments on those 284 subheadings. The timeline to submit your comments, if your company is interested in submitting them, or if you're a member of an association and would like to contribute your comments towards that association's comments, is July 20th. So not too much time left to get those comments in. There will be a public hearing to represent yourself, again, if you would like to participate, on July 24th. And then the rebuttal comments after the public hearing will be due by July 31st. Again, tight timeline on getting the second list reviewed and comments on that second list out there as well. And then finally, the Section 232 automotive update. The comments closed on that about a week ago. Over 2,000 comments were submitted, and the public hearing dates will be held on July 19th and 20th. So once again, there will be a review period after that point, during which point the over 2,000 comments and the comments that will be made during that public hearing will be reviewed, and we will be keeping an eye on what comes out of that as to whether or not there will be any further duties or any further action as a result of all of those comments. Finally, in other trade news, lest people think that there's only rising tariffs out there, we're here to tell you that that's actually not the case. There was some good news out of the APAC region this past week. The Asia-Pacific Trade Agreement announced the fact that they had their second amendment go into effect on July 1st this past week. The APAC or APTA agreement is actually the oldest of the APAC FTAs. It dates back to 1975, and the Second Amendment is one that the member states, as you can see there, China, India, South Korea, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Laos, agreed to put a number of benefits into the Second Amendment, but two of them that are going to impact traders the most with greatest benefits included additional duty cuts of over 10,000 items for the 6 member countries and some preferential tax rates of over 1,200 items for the 2 least developed member states of Bangladesh and Laos. So as you can see, there's a lot that's been going on this past week as well. As always, in an environment where global trade regulations change this quickly, it's important for all companies to monitor and stay up to date with the countries that they import into and export out of. Our global trade content team monitors and updates tariff schedules for over 205 countries and territories on a daily basis. We will continue to monitor these changing global conditions and provide regular updates through our straight-to-the-point videos. As always, thanks for listening.